All right. So next thing we got to cover and talk about is actually a pretty serious condition that is seems to be spreading around the country. And as a physician, I feel I got to warn you guys about it. I think it's like my duty. It's called Bigotophilia. I don't know if you guys have heard about this before, but the most recent case seemed to happen in Indiana, where Governor Pence passed this Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And, it's like a pretty dramatic case of bigotophilia. And, I think that what it is that, you can recognize the symptoms and you can recognize somebody who's suffering from it because, when they do like a signing ceremony for these kinds of pieces of legislation, they seem to have like some really prominent bigots in the picture with them, and these are the people that they write these policies for. They want to stay in their good graces. Our friends over at the gay lesbian alliance and the Anti-Defamation League, the folks over at GLAAD, they did a great job of actually showing this photograph where, you've got Governor Mike Pence is at the signing ceremony, right? And, when you look at the photo, like he says that this is not about anti-gay discrimination and that's not what the intent of all this is. And that's another symptom of bigotophilia is that, your words start to not make sense even though you know what you intended to do, like what you do and what you say don't quite match up. That's bigotophilia for you. But yeah, what's interesting is that they have a photo of Mike Pence at the signing ceremony on their on the website. And the way that that he is, very comfortable with some bigots are the other people who are in the photo with him. You've got Micah Clark, who, and I'm quoting the work here from the folks over at GLAAD, saying that Micah Clark believes homosexuality is a treatable disorder. He publicly raged against a lesbian high school student over a prom tuxedo. This is how this guy spends his time, is that he wants to publicly rage against a lesbian high school student over a prom tuxedo. Then you have Kurt Smith, and you got to look at this picture because Kurt Smith is doing one of these things where you can tell this is a grown man standing on tippy toes, just dying to be in this photo. He's straining his neck, trying to look over the dude in front of him. I mean, it's sad when you see a grown up acting like this. But anyway, Kurt Smith equates homosexuality with bestiality and adultery. He helped write the bill. Okay, so bigotophilia here. All right. And then the guy standing almost directly behind Mike Pence, this is Eric Miller, all right? He distributed a fear flyer falsely claiming that pastors could be jailed for preaching against homosexuality after the same-sex marriage, after same-sex marriage passed. So basically, when Indiana was told that, they got to recognize same-sex marriage, this guy, Eric Miller, hands out these flyers saying that pastors could be jailed if they preached against homosexuality. Of course, there's nothing true about that. You can preach against it all you want, and you'll just be another case of bigotophilia, but you're not going to go to jail for it. But yeah, no, bigotophilia. I mean, Indiana's not alone. This is as I was saying, it's spreading across the country. We seem to be you've got, guys like Mike Pence, Jeb Bush, all these folks falling over themselves, trying to say that they're not anti-gay, but they support this this Religious Freedom Restoration Act and things like it in all of these states. And it's a serious condition because bigotophilia, what it really tries to do is that it tries to create a system where we have second-class citizens among us for no other fault than because of who they love and who they are and how they identify themselves. That is what, that's the real threat of bigotophilia spreading the way that it is that it creates this second-class citizenship. And I look at things like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and what scares me as a healthcare provider, and this is, a little bit of the joking aside, what scares me as a healthcare provider is that, things like this are trying to are trying to give encouragement to the ignorant. It gives encouragement to the ignorant in the sense that, let's say you are a pharmacist who believes that HIV and AIDS is God's punishment on homosexuality. That's a belief that has been there since, AIDS emerged in the 1980s. It was wildly popular at first. It has that notion has shrunk down, but is still there among some, very, very conservative, bigoted, ignorant people. But let's say you're a pharmacist who happens to have that belief. You could actually deny somebody of their HIV medication because you feel that you feel you don't want to get in the way of God's punishment on this gay person. And you would be protected by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Let's say you're an EMT and you're called to an emergency and, it's house is on fire. And you decide that you can't bring it upon yourself to offer first aid to somebody who is homosexual. And that your religious conscience, keeps you from doing that. Again, Religious Freedom Restoration Act is probably going to come to your rescue. There was an incident in Michigan, not Indiana, but in Michigan, where a similar act is actually up for possible signing. Governor hasn't decided yet which way he's going to go, and I'm hoping that he's paying attention to what's happening in Indiana right now. But no, up in Michigan, there was a pediatrician who refused to care for a child because that child had lesbian parents. Had these two women brought their child to this pediatrician's office, were kept waiting an unusual amount of time, and then that pediatrician's colleague came into the room saying that she was going to be taking care of the kid, not the original pediatrician with whom this family had the appointment. And instead, that pediatrician had given these people a note saying that, after much prayer and contemplation, she decided that she could not be the healthcare provider for this child because she disagreed with the lifestyle of the parents, and that her religious convictions, did not allow her to be this kid's doctor, even though she is a pediatrician. This is her job, and this is her training. Somebody like that could be protected under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. What I find so offensive about this is that it actually has nothing to do with religious freedom. This is outright bigotry hiding under, religious freedom and religious protection, and it actually sullies the good name of people of faith. I am not a Christian myself, but I've had the pleasure and honor of working with a number of Christians on things like health reform, things like Medicaid, chip expansion, and a variety of health issues. And what I've always been moved by is how they seem to have a very good handle on what the true gospel is of doing right by people who are in need and regardless of who they are, if there's suffering in the world, these folks look to their, religious conscience and their spiritual faith as a source of strength and purpose and guidance to do good work. And that to me is what, is the role of religion in our lives, is that it really is there to, keep us strong during times when this gets challenging. I know that I have turned to my faith as a Hindu and as somebody who, follows more Eastern traditions. I know that I've turned to my faith for a sense of purpose, for a sense of strength whenever I've felt, really just lost and bewildered about, how on earth is there just this much suffering in this one family, and and all those things that, providers go through. Why is this happening? I feel like, religion has been there in a variety of forms to offer some counsels, to offer some guidance, and then to send me back into the struggle and to do my best for the people that I am serving. And to me, I think that is really religion at its best. And when I see things like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, I kind of feel like, what exactly are you trying to restore? Because it certainly doesn't sound like you're trying to restore the best of the American faith experience. It sounds like you're trying to restore something that we should really have rooted out a long time ago, but seems to be this like lingering cancer on American society that seems to, like hold up religious scripture as an excuse to be a bigot, as an excuse to be cruel, as an excuse to be discriminatory, and to then, I guess, somehow absolve yourself from the hate. Like, there's things about this that really just, gross me out to my core. I'm very proud of the people of Indiana for standing up and advocating. I want people to what we can learn from what's going on in Indiana is a couple of things. One is that like it really does make a difference when you get out into the street and you demonstrate, when you pick up the phone and you call your elected official, when you decide that you're going to write, tweet, when you decide to to give up silence and to actually raise your voice. Guys like Mike Pence have to now get back on, TV, and he embarrasses himself. The man suffers from bigotophilia. I guess this is where, his words and his inability to hear, reporters' questions properly. It happens. This guy was asked, okay, so they asked if the law would have forced, this is that religious, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. If it would have, without it, would a Christian florist be forced to provide flowers for the wedding of a gay or lesbian couple? A reporter asked this, right? And the Governor Pence's response is of course, a non-response to this reporter. He says, "What courts have found without exception over the past 20 plus years is that the state has a compelling interest in combating discrimination, and I support that interpretation. I believe in my heart of hearts that no one should be discriminated against because of who they are, who they love, or what they believe." Now, the thing is that at the same time, he's not really telling, this, hypothetical Christian florist. And mind you, there's a number of, actual businesses that are not hypothetical, small businesses that, they said that we don't want to bake cakes for gay weddings. We don't want to, do, floral arrangements. There are people who have been vocal about. What's sad, and I know that this is the bigotophilia talking in people like Governor Mike Pence, is that they're not telling those small business owners that, that closely held belief that you have is wrong, and it has nothing to do with your religion. You just don't like gay people. Similar to how people who owned lunch counters back in the day did not like the idea of serving a person of color. And you have to get over it. You have to move on. You have to get with the rest of society. Because the big business community has been responding in really fascinating ways. I was surprised to see Eli Lilly, of all people, the drug company, weighed in on this because they've got, some major offices there in Indiana. You've got the NCAA that came out saying that, they've got some serious concerns about this. You have whole states and cities that are boycotting Indiana, like San Francisco and Connecticut, both, had their elected officials come out saying that they're boycotting the state of Indiana. And honestly, this kind of pressure, only happens if we stand up for each other. And that's the biggest learning point I think we have of this. And it's fascinating that this is what's happening during Easter week because, right before these guys break for Easter, this is what they decide to work on. They decide to work on something hateful, towards, our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender brothers and sisters. And what I am so moved by is that everyday citizens actually decided that they were going to really do what Jesus did and stand up for the people who were otherwise going to be downtrodden. And I commend, average citizens for taking to the streets, raising their voice, and making their support known, because that is how that's the prescription against bigotophilia, is that you gotta raise your voice. You gotta, make your presence felt and really let folks like, guys like Governor Mike Pence, let them know that this is not okay.